Good morning. I'm Chuck Unruh. I'm the Director for Administration at Walter Reed National Military Medical Center, also known as Director for anything. On the Army side, it's probably more Deputy Commander for Administration. On the civilian side, Chief Operating Officer. When I came through Baylor in 2000, it was after being on the tactical side. I had no idea that I'd be going through Baylor at that time. Fortunately, when I went through, graduated 2002, I had the opportunity to stand among some giants, including Rob Goodman, who's kind of a legend in the AMED as well as DHA. And then General Gallagher was also my commander. So I had two legends that tried to teach me everything. And of course, I only remembered about that much, but at least it got me to this point where I could speak here. Whether or not I'm going to lighten too many folks, you'll be the judge of that. But this is our facility, one of our many entrances. We are extremely complex, as you'll see. So talk a little about Walter Reed, what it actually is, and then a few preceptor tips. Uh-oh, that didn't look good, did it? That looked like a forward button. Apparently not. Who's been to Walter Reed before? Bethesda. Okay, so we have a few folks at least. We've got a rough understanding of what it looks like. Who's been lost there before? Same hands. Exactly. It's probably the most difficult to navigate facility I've ever been in.
Tripler's close.
Tripler? Yeah, I think a little bit.
Yeah, you get lost there too pretty easily.
Yeah. 2.25 million square feet, probably 87 different doors. It's extremely complex. That's good. I already broke the computer, so that's impressive. Not planning on that.
Well, can we adjust from there? I was just wondering if it was the input.
All right, I'm assuming that's the forward button. All right, here we go. Here's the agenda I'll follow this morning. Let's talk a little bit about Walter Reed, where it actually came from, and some of our complex relationships that we have. We are a little J joint facility. We're not completely integrated with the Army and the Navy there together. We have a little bit of Air Force. So we'll just call ourselves a little J for right now, and that presents a number of challenges. Our organization, how we're laid out, our purpose, our staffing, the DFA, what that is, because that's different. As you look across the Army models and the Navy models, we're completely different. Then some resident tips and resident projects. I'd like to highlight what our resident has done because he's a superstar. Here's our legacy, Walter Reed. So his key piece on there, if you remember nothing else, at least you'll learn a little about Major Walter Reed, the youngest student to ever graduate from medical school. I had no idea. So he graduated, I think when he was 17. So how does he pull that off? I gotta Google that one because that just sounds too young. But his big piece right here, find a cause for typhoid fever, discover mosquitoes are actually transmitting it. So way back in history, he's established in military medicine, not just the Army medicine. He just happened to be an Army officer. That's where we looked at originally. Used to be an old cabbage field here back in 1938. So it's changed a lot. That goes without saying, but that's what we wanted to be back then. So the finest establishment in the world for the teaching of military medicine. Then you'll see our mission and vision, and it looks remarkably similar. That's a little bit more modern photo. And we're still building. We're undergoing a lot of construction. So about $800 million in military projects. Part of it's already been going on for a couple of years. It's huge. We'll do things completely different, just like we do at Walter Reed. We're actually going to build internally. So we're going to demolish probably 500,000 square feet of clinical areas, of admin areas, right inside the facility itself. So right inside some of this area back in here. We'll demolish that whole thing, and then we're going to build from within. So kind of like the Phoenix, which is really difficult to do military construction-wise. I know Mary could probably attest to that with her experience at HFPA. The future, we are very close. If you've ever been to Walter Reed, if you've been down to USU, right here, we have the nation's medical school. Right across the street, undergoing a lot of challenges right now just on the funding side, would be NIH. So just across the highway, which is a unique location for us to be that close to both of those centers of excellences. So we are pretty much a 5-year-old supervised by a 3-year-old. So here we are at Walter Reed. That's our chain of command right now. Fort Belvoir, I know Kyle could attest to a little bit of that piece. It's a small organization. You could fit them on this side of the room more or less. DHA, not going to fit in this building. So if you look at the changes that will come with NDAA, we have no idea what's going to happen to us. We know we're relatively used to working through this chain right now. Other services, who knows? A lot of big unknowns, a lot of nervous folks out there. So it's a lot cleaner on our side. But then under us, we have the Pentagon. We have a clinic there, D. Lorenzo. That is proposed to shift over to Fort Belvoir. And then we have a couple community-based medical homes. Our relationships, though, get very fuzzy when we look at the Army support that we get as well as the Navy support. Army support is coming from a troop commander, an 06 level commander. Then how we actually get taskings, sometimes they're coming over here from this side, right here. Other times they're coming down appropriately through this area. So if we want a PROFIS professional filler to go somewhere, we might have different ways of getting it. If we have a hey you, a tasker, and then we have the asker to go this country with this congressional delegation this period of time. A lot of different ways, and it's definitely not the easiest when you look at just our continuity and how we function and operate. National Capital Region, this is the first time I've actually worked in the area before. I don't know if it's a penalty for being everywhere else, being at Longstool for 10 years or so, being at Fort Sam, being at Fort Bragg, and they decided it was time for me to come up to this area. So a huge number of organizations around here, and you see the DHA pieces of it, the DHA parts, right in there. And then you see the Army side. This whole thing is more or less the BMISM. The enrolled population, 245, so about 250,000 or so. So a fair amount. Just different, completely different still than San Antonio. This is our purpose. So America's Academic Health Center, the global leader for military medical readiness. The extraordinary care is one thing that we've stuck to since we actually did stand up, since we were born out of two completely separate organizations, two completely separate cultures. It's our vision right here, to be the finest establishment in the world. We went big. We weren't going to say no in CONUS or in the MHS. We'll go world, because some of the capabilities that we do have, they are the finest in the world. And the practice in the military medicine, completely different. But at the same time, a lot of the methods, a lot of techniques we use can be applied to anywhere else. Boston Marathon bombing. We did see patients from the Boston Marathon bombing. So our work in prosthetics, for example, is world leading. That's what our team is, about 7,000 or so. And you can see the numbers on there. We do clearly have a Navy influence. We are slightly outnumbered. Makes it interesting about the time of the Army-Navy game. This year, fortunately, like a blind squirrel finding a nut, we had the opportunity to actually take it out a little bit on the Navy side. So we went back and forth and told them we're going to change the name of our galley Navy term to a DFAC, to the Army term on there. That was our opportunity. But look on there, the numbers, we're about half military or so. Civilians and contractors, the other half of it. Some of those came from Walter Reed, some were from National Naval Medical, some came from other places. So we have a mixture of cultures. Provider-wise, it's huge though, 1,830 providers. That's a lot of providers. Those are a lot of ADM encounters, a lot of other requirements that we're asking the providers to do, to sign this, to sign that. So that is clearly hurting cats. What we do matters. So we don't have a huge number of enrollees, 40,000 enrollees, but a lot of our enrollees are folks that are higher ranks. We don't necessarily have the PFC with 2 or 3 kids, so a lot of the senior military members are enrolled to us, and retired family members, retired general officers, retired, we have SESs. Take care of a lot of folks. In the part on here, we're called the President's Hospital for a reason, because we do serve the President, we do serve the family, the executive branch, as well as Supreme Court justices, members of Congress. So that is our clientele. And it's very apparent when you are there, when there is a certain visit going on, and things change a bit. Birth-wise, not too many, so we're having a couple a day or so. But we look at our complexity, a little different than other places I've been. So if you're at a little Fort Jackson, a community hospital, and then you look at the complexity there, you come to our level, and you read through the morning report, listen to that, these are things that are just befuddle me, the amount of challenges that we have clinically. From the NICU to the HEMOC to the tumors among old folks, young folks, quite a bit of challenge there clinically. Fair amount of visits, about 3,000 or so visits. Our inpatient census, right now it's around there or so. The OR cases, say 40 is not that many when we have 20 or so ORs, but the big piece of that is we're trying not to do little finger bumps, little tiny things. Let's try to do the replacements versus the scopes. Try to get complex as we can to advance the military medicine. Doesn't help us too much if we're doing an hour-long case in an OR. Let's do the 4 or 5 hour cases where they are complex, where we have the only active duty transplant surgeon in the U.S. military. So the more we do that, the more that our providers are ready when they do deploy somewhere. We pull people out all the time that go to the Iraqs, the Syrias, and the other countries that are out there. The little strange thing under the DFA is I do have the DFAC under me. So about 4,000 meals, 18 and a half hours of meal service that we're providing. So that's a big area. About 100 military staff members deployed at any one time. The academic advantage for us, it's huge. It's a great advantage just based on our location. So about half of MHS research is coming through us. And GME, 67 different programs. So a huge number of graduate medical education programs coming through us. So training a third of the MHS military providers. So once again, huge numbers. And they're doing very well too. And the simulation center's state of the art. The part for the DFA piece, actually we have 1 Baylor resident this year. We'll have 2 next year. Thank you, appreciate that. Then we'll also have a graduate student coming from GMU. She's a complete civilian master's in healthcare administration. She volunteered to say, hey, how can I participate in this? How could I learn about military medicine? So, sure, come on board. And we'll use the same framework, kind of, I wouldn't say dumbed down a little bit, but a little slimmer version of it, to have her be successful professionally development-wise, as well as help us out. She does have a little bit of skin in the game, but at the same time, we're not doing these things just for free. We do expect a benefit, and we'll get that from her, because she's extremely bright with an excellent background. That's our commitment to excellence. You've probably heard of the Cancer Moonshot. Our piece of there is our John Murtha Cancer Center, the MAT-C, where we're doing the advanced military training, where we have shooting ranges, and we have climbing, and a lot of capabilities there with the pool. At NICO, if you've been around the military side, you've heard about the National Intrepid Center of Excellences. So we have one of the first ones there. Our trauma center certification right now, we'd like to be a level 1 recognized by Maryland. That in itself is a challenge that we're going through right now, because if you look across the street or so from our tower, you could probably see where Suburban is, where they do have a level 1 trauma center. So our competition is a little bit fierce, and why would they want to just say, sure, you could share some of the trauma workload, some of the high acuity, the trauma, fresh trauma care versus the 2, 3, 4 days from the battlefield care. We'll continue to try to pursue that and see what we can work out. The inpatient neurobehavioral unit, that's the key nowadays if you look at post-traumatic stress and how we're dealing with that and how we're caring for that, as well as traumatic brain injury. The healing environment itself, our grounds are relatively small. At the same time, we have the ability to have roads built around there. We have plenty of trails. We have deer. I was running along here the other day, and this little tiny fawn is just sitting there on the grass, which is unique in itself. So if you're walking around the woods and you just see deer there, that helps the healing environment itself. And we've done research on that too, and actually getting patients out and just walking through the hills. And it's remarkable. You wouldn't expect that, but back in the area there, well, you'll see some of it. Some of the facilities, it's just like anything, a little different. Now we have 5 Fisher houses to take care of the family members that do come in, as they're coming in for who knows how long it could be. Could be a year or so. We have some people that stay for quite a long time. Some will go up to 2 years, just getting the care that they might need. Here's a current org chart for the DFA. It is a little bit tiny on there. I apologize for that. But some of the pieces on here, they're kind of important. We have the typical information management technology. I appreciate Bev Beavers potentially supporting us with an Army CIO, since we do have a gap right there. A slight gap, to say the least. Nutrition, I mentioned that with our dining facility, the inpatient nutrition that we have, as well as plenty of outpatient. Our readiness and operations, so a huge piece on there. Emergency management, I'd put it above anybody else, just MHS I've seen so far. So that's kind of a plug, and I'll offer our folks up. We do have a lot of expertise in that area, so if you're struggling with emergency management, you can reach out to me and I'll put you in touch with our person. He's extremely good at what he's doing. He's a retired naval officer. That's a nurse. Patient administration, open kimono. Our data quality is not MHS leading. It's not necessarily extraordinary, and Kyle could attest to that piece too. But we are working on improving that, which involves the cultural change. That's a little bit harder to get to. Logistics is huge too. The amount of supplies we have coming in, the biomed support for all our equipment, for the 20 ORs, for the 7 SIVR labs. Extremely complex, and making sure we get exactly what we need. And that's joint like anywhere else. So we do have some struggles there to get exactly what you need every single time. Facilities, $800 million project. Our facilities are huge, and they're not necessarily brand new and state-of-the-art everywhere. So how are we maintaining those? And think of it probably a money pit, where you have your old house built in 1950s or so, and you might have pipe that burst. So what do? What does that impact? For us, it ends up impacting other clinics. And so we're constantly addressing pipes bursting or outages or other things. And we're a really aggressive facility officer who happens to be, he's a Navy engineer, so he's their construction, their CB, so he is on top of things. Probably the best 05 officer we have across our command, just leading our efforts to make sure that it does not impact other patients. When we have to evacuate one of our floors for a fire, it's a tremendous problem with the patients. Never mind our staff and the staff satisfaction piece of it. Here's another code red. Why am I going out again? Type thing. So for the DFA itself, about 1,000 folks or so a fair amount. But fortunately, I have really solid department chiefs. Some of the resident tips. I'll put a plug in for Rob Getty right now. I looked at his slides ahead of time, and he definitely has a great checklist, and might be the pilot mentality too. For me, I might be out here just floating along as an administrator type, but he's nailed down the checklist. So definitely pay more attention to his piece on the details, and then modify and have your plan set up ahead of time. When I came in, we didn't necessarily have something that was set up. It's kind of a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and using the handbook, using that, I think you'll be able to put something together. It works very well. Also using the resident. The resident's there. They've already gone through it. Use the resident to help sponsor the incoming resident to help develop that plan and orientate them. So the admin grand rounds, you've probably heard of surgical grand rounds before, so the effort that Captain Steve Hurdle came up with, who's actually a physician assistant, let's have admin grand rounds and bring in different experts. From the Army side, from the MedCom side, we're not shy. We have no problem reaching out to the Army side if they have something better or the Navy has something better. So reached out, and we had Maggie Smith came, and she talked about RVUs and workloads and the Army systems. In July, we're shooting to have Mr. Goodman come and speak, just impart his knowledge on us. And we'll continue to have our admin residents coordinate that with the amount of speakers that we have access to in DHA and other local places, have them come in and educate our administrators. The CDI piece, that's crucial with our workload, ensuring we get the credit for everything we do, because as much as we pummel our providers and tell them they have to sign all these things, same time we need to try to facilitate, make it easier for them to capture credit for what they do and ensure that documentation is there. Proven patient flow. Since he is a PA, he had a unique opportunity to get behind the curtain and actually talk RVUs, talk ALTA, the 99215s, and explain things to providers the way providers can understand versus just being, oh, you're a bean counter, you're something else, and you just want me to do more with less. So he's great for that, and looking at the flow down there, looking at the rooms when they don't necessarily have the 2 rooms per provider or the optimal support staff. The ALTA lag, that's our elephant in the room. It is very obvious. It is actually measurable now in a objective way versus just having the subjective, it's slower than everywhere else I've been, kind of the Eeyore, it's terrible and nothing ever works right. He actually measured it using real-time patients, and I'll show you a little bit of this as the highlight. Hadn't been done before. Everybody said, no, you're fine. Kind of like my daughters. Oh, you're fine, Dad. No, we're not fine. We have challenges with ALTA, and it's a lot slower than it needs to be. Risk-adjusted inpatient mortality, our other challenge, data quality, I mentioned a little bit of it, but what is the impact of it if you have a patient that comes in your facility that's extremely sick, serious stages of cancer, if they have stage 3, stage 4 cancer, they're expected to die. They're not going to live necessarily too much longer. But how are you coding that? What if you're giving them palliative care and you don't have that on there? I understand it's not always for patients that are short at the end of their life, but at the same time, if you're not documenting something like that, and your mortality looks a lot higher than it should be. So if we look higher than BAMC for some reason, why? Is it our quality of care, or is it the fact that our coding, our documentation doesn't support that, yes, these are really sicker patients that are expected to die? And Steve jumped into that, and he actually briefed NCRMD Director Adam Mullane on that. Really eye-opening, and it gives us another reason. It's not just, well, sign your notes because I said to type thing. It's sign your notes because it's affecting our quality, our reputation. So that was a crucial one. Then the EVD, Ebola virus disease, one of our best practices that was orchestrated from our emergency management leader right there is just our response to EVD. Right now we're one of the DoD sites to respond for EVD patients coming into us. NIH right across the street, they have capability as well. So we try to synchronize our efforts with them with the amount of effort it will take if you have an EVD patient. 21 liters of fluid or so that are becoming a day, that you figure out what you have to do with that. How do you dispose of it? And how do you actually take care of an EVD patient? What if that patient requires surgery? How do you physically do that without putting your staff at risk? So extremely complex. And that's our best practice that Steve wrote up. Some projects definitely on the Army side, your other side, look at the evaluations early, put the goals in there, what they want to have for their objectives, measurable, smart objectives, a typical thing like that. The schedule is a starting point. And it's good to see that the schedule will change, ask for it. Like the idea of having the leave time built in there, so it gives a little more flexibility as well as the research time. Oops. They definitely have to know your priorities. You have to know what you need them to focus on as they're going through. And the schedule is changing. It'll change all the time, and that's okay as long as you're not just going out there and blowing things off completely and saying, I need 8 weeks of research instead. Going to the key meetings, behind the scenes, they should have access to pretty much any meeting except for some of the extremely sensitive, if it's classification or if it's just personal matter, provider matters. Invite them to all those meetings you can. The special classes, the Med Excellence, the Army side, we're fortunate to be kind of an Army client on the MedCom side, so he did go into the decision science training to find out everything that they're learning there. We send a number of our staff there, so it's extremely helpful for him to have the knowledge on there, as well as attending quality forums, his professional conference, AMSIS, where he presented a poster. And just the other external rotations in our area. For us, DHA is down the road. It's not a short drive, depending on the traffic on there, but it's relatively close and easy to get to. So you had a chance to go down there on the Army side and see OTSG and MedCom. Weekly meetings. Schedule a weekly meeting. That's my recommendation. Schedule it, put it on the calendar somehow so you have it and you build it into the rhythm, and then it's there. Going over the lessons learned, use the SWOT analysis. That works fairly well for us. And also to see where we are, and that gives me the opportunity to see in my areas as well as other areas. Encourage a resident to follow up with them. Don't just send something in to me, say, hey, these folks are just all goofed up. Actually have that conversation with them and give them something. If you're going to go through their area, act as a consultant, because that's more or less what the residents can be for you. Give the solid feedback so they know, so are there no surprises. Because people will be a little bit probably sensitive anyway, and they might be a little skeptical and nervous. You have someone coming around like they're coming in to audit you from CMS or somewhere. And just following up, find out where they are on their project status. It does a really good job of just having that update, what has changed on there. We'll look at the daily report versus the weekly he's doing right now. So we'll take a close look at that. This is the elephant in the room I mentioned. So this piece right now, average lag time, coming from Walter Reed DHA, 7.9 seconds. His analysis, 182 seconds. So when a provider pushes on the button to do something, imagine waiting that long. It's not just a plug for Colonel Beavers, but just look around your areas and find out, do you have something like that? Do you have the elephant in the room that's behind the scenes, and how are you actually getting that feedback out there? If you hear the anecdotals, how do you turn the subjective anecdotal into objective, yes, it's really out there? It could be cultural, it could be system problems that you do have. So he quantified this for us, gave a subjective baseline and get a little bit more attention. My ask for Defense Health Agency is if you are assuming, and if you do have the admin control over all the other MHS, MTFs, how do you measure it across a system? Don't look at the way you've looked at it before, because that part's not working. Look at this tool, look at a little different, standardized processes, and figure out where they're ranking. If you're at home, you're using your little speedtest.net. Figure out how fast you're, beat up your provider and say, hey, I'm asking for 50 and 50 and I'm getting 10. Why is it so slow? Is it because all my kids are on there or not? So he quantified that extremely well and professionally. That's some of his data. So it's not just he said, hey, there is a lag on there. He did the statistics on it too. Sample size 40, 2 different times. Not the hugest, but was found to be statistically significant on there. So and we'll expand that to different areas, different buildings. We have buildings, a lot of different ages on there. Some are 50 years old, some are 5 years old. And even the new ones coming in. Where is the difference? It's a difference in the equipment. It's a difference the wire that's running to it. So that just gave us a great baseline to start with. This control chart, just looking at it. So solid on that, and also solid on the clinical side, so it blends them both together. That's all I have for you about Walter Reed. Subject to any questions, you could ask the questions now, throw things out. We could transition to Rob Getty, and he could talk about his piece, and then you could ask at the end. Or some folks are saying, phew, I'm glad I'm not there.